Order. Question number 11, David Shearer.
Speaking to the Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes.
Supplementary question, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When he said critics of the GCSB bill are, quote, misinformed, is he saying that the Law Society, the Human Rights Commission and the Privacy Commissioner are all misinformed by saying that the bill is rushed, intrusive and inconsistent with the Bill of Rights?
That's right. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
In principle and in parts, Mr. Speaker, yes. If I go to the 2003 Act, it states, and I quote, that GCSB can, quote, assist any public authority or other entity in New Zealand or abroad. Further, it allows it to do that on, quote, on any matter that is relevant to the functions of that public authority or entity. That is extremely wide, and as the member knows, because he's heard the arguments, in fact, actually, the new legislation not only significantly increases the oversight, but actually narrows the mandate that GCSB can operate in.
Supplementary question, David Shearer.
Will the bill govern the collection of metadata collected by the GCSB?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, the metadata is treated the same as content of communication in the bill, and there is no difference.
In light of his answer,
question, David Shearer.
How will the collection of metadata of New Zealanders be regulated, and in particular, will there be a requirement for either an interception warrant or an access authorisation?
Mr. Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Part of the question, yes.
Supplementary question, David Shearer.
Does
Order. David Shearer, supplementary question.
Does he think there are adequate checks and balances of the GCSB, given that as the Prime Minister he has the final say on the appointment of the head of the GCSB, who reports solely to him, chairs the Intelligence and Security Committee, which is oversight, sets that committee's agenda, he has the casting vote on that, he recommends the appointment of the Inspector General of Intelligence and the Commissioner of Warrants? Does he not think that there's a little too much power in one person's hands?
Order. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think that the reality is the oversight of GCSB is, as a result of the legislation, significantly improved and enhanced, and that includes everything from basically a three-person panel, two other people to assist what's happening in terms of what the inspector does. It also includes registration annually of the amount of information that is collected by those agencies, and transparently it includes changes to the ISC so that both the inspector comes along once a year and obviously others, and the committee can do its work. It includes a review starting in 2015 and a review every 5 to 7 years. And Mr. Speaker, what I have seen is members like Phil Goff going on about them not...
Speaker.
Point of order, David Shearer. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I think the question has adequately been addressed. And
thank you.
Supplementary question, David
Why
Shearer.
did he, as the chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, oppose the opportunity for us to hear from the New Zealand Defence Force, the SIS and the police about why they needed the GCSB assistance rather than allowing them to give evidence before us?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, any of those organisations were free to put in the submission. We didn't stop them doing that. Secondly, I would have thought it's inherent in the legislation, which is the very purpose of the legislation is to re-implement the 2003 Act that the Labor Party passed that allows assistance to those agencies, except we're doing it up front in a way where it's transparent with much better oversight. And I go back to the point I was about to make before, Mr. Speaker. There are many people on the other side that used all of this information. They were more than happy when it was in a much broader framework but now they don't want it. And, Mr. Speaker, I find myself looking at, I think, the only leader of the opposition around the world that doesn't think their citizens should have decent security and decent rights.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Frankly, that's our...
Order. The member's raising a point of order.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Speaker. That last comment, sir, was out of line. We are here today to ask questions of that government about the behaviour and the actions of a future GCSB, which people have lost confidence in.
The member has a perfect right to raise a point of order. On this occasion, I don't agree with the member. I don't believe the answer given to the question that was raised was out of order at all.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
David.
I'll take the Honourable David.
Thank you,
Parker.
Mr. Speaker. It must have been obvious to the Speaker that throughout that point of order we had a barrage of interjection from the government that the Speaker did not address, and I'm asking you why that was the case.
It was certainly obvious to me that there was a barrage of interjection. I had difficulty hearing from the member. I was concentrating on hearing from him. The barrage was coming from, I think, a significant number of members. I would have been unable to identify a specific single member at all. Is there a further point of order? Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, I don't accept your explanation. Mr. Speaker, if you looked...
Order!
If you looked to your right, you would have seen the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Leader of the House. If you just picked one or two, you might have been able to stop it, sir. You ignored it.
Order. No, I don't need any first. I accept the point the member is making. If I had looked and attempted to identify a member, I'm sure I would have found plenty. So I accept the point that the Honourable Trevor Mallard made. I was having difficulty hearing David Shearer, and I was concentrating very much. I was looking at David Shearer, trying to interpret. But I do accept the point the member's made.
Speaking to the point of order.
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I make the point very simply. It's not a point of order that the Leader of the Opposition doesn't like something I say. If he doesn't like that, he can take offence and ask me to withdraw and apologise.
That's not a helpful point of order. I have a further point of order from the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
The Honourable Mr. Mallard raised a point of order with you and you accepted it. It no longer therefore existed. So why do you give the Prime Minister a chance to speak to reopen the point of order?
Because at the time the Prime Minister raised and said he wants to speak to the point of order, I'm unsure, particularly what he's going to raise. So, question number 12, John Hayes.
Point of order. Point of order. Point of order.
Point of order, right.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's words were, after you had accepted Mr. Mallard's explanation and agreed with him, speaking to that point of order. Not a new point of order, the point of order you just had disposed of. Why did you allow him this special privilege?
Because I wasn't aware of what he would raise at the time he said he was going to speak to the point of order.
Point of order.
Order. This matter is now disrupting and becoming disorderly. I will not take a further point of order. Point of order. Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, in the answer to the last question that was asked by David Shearer, he asked about why a certain group of organisations had not been brought in front of a select committee when they'd been asked to be. The incident that caused disorder was the Prime Minister moving on to personally attack the Leader of the Opposition about his interest in security matters. That is what caused disorder in the House. That's why David Shearer took a point of order. That is the issue of order, the Prime Minister's behaviour and going beyond the question.
Well, except that the original question from David Shearer was why did the Prime Minister, as Chair, why did he oppose? So it was quite a directed question, in my opinion, at the Prime Minister himself. Question number 12, John Hayes. Order. I certainly hope this is a fresh point of order that's being raised by the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Could you tell us, given that it was a direct question to the Prime Minister, if it wasn't a direct question, should have been directed at somebody else, who should it have been? It was a direct, non-political question. Why did he oppose certain agencies coming before the Select Committee, not political, straight,
Can
and
I
directed
ask
at the
the
Prime
member if
Minister?
he wants to raise a point of order, would he think carefully about it, that is not a legitimate point of order. It was a question that was directed to the Prime Minister as the Chair. That's not out of order at all. It was a political question to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister responded.
Speaker.
Order.
Point of order, Mr.
If this is a fresh point of order, I will hear it, but if it's relitigating this particular matter, then I will be asking the member to leave the chamber.
Mr. Speaker...
Is it a fresh point of order?
It is a fresh point of order.
It's a fresh point of order, then I'm happy to hear it.
Mr. Speaker, when you go to Government House, you ask for the freedom of speech and the right of members to speak and hear. Included in that, Mr. Speaker, is the right of people to ask direct questions of the Executive. The question that I have to you is, when are we going to get an arrangement whereby, when people have asked questions in an absolutely proper way, in an area for which a minister has responsibility, even more responsibility than a normal select committee chair, because it's a member in charge of a bill as well as being in charge of a statutory committee. My question is, what remedy do members have when they are accused of not taking into account the security of New Zealanders, which is effectively treason, sir? I mean, that's... Well,
order, this is a point of order.
That's effectively the accusation, Mr. Speaker, and it is something which members on this side find very offensive. And my question to you is, what remedies do members have under these rulings?
Speaking to the point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, if members are offended, then they do have recourse in standing orders to raise that matter and to have the offence struck out. That's long been established. But I think the bigger problem here is the failure on the part of questioners today, on numerous occasions I might say, to recognise that when some answers to questions that are asked stray into an area that points out some of the inconsistencies of public view held by the person asking a question, that there is suddenly a leaping to the feet to in fact deny the very free speech that Mr Mallard is talking of. And I think, Mr Speaker, you have been right to rule that there are sometimes questions that are asked with a particular political outcome in mind, or a particular answer in mind, which does make it a much more political question beyond the obvious political questions asked each day. And that is where we're getting into, I think, some difficulty. But it comes down, I think, as you have previously ruled. If people want to go down that track, then they should expect the sort of answers that they are getting and finding very uncomfortable.
I appreciate the point the member makes. At this stage, I don't intend to rule further on this matter. When Member Honourable Trevor Mallard raises an issue and suggests what we've heard is actually going as far as treason, that becomes, in my mind, a very, very serious matter. And on that basis, I want to take the opportunity of reviewing the Hansard, particularly in light of the whole of this question, before I come back to the House. Question number 12, John Hayes.
My question, Speaker, is